Hey everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well, and welcome to another episode of my Metal Vault, where I will be exploring and showing you my favorite albums within heavy metal, thrash metal, death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all that excellent stuff. And I have another excellent album for you, an absolute banger, another absolute banger. And it's one, I've said this before on my other episodes of my Metal Vault and my other videos, that you need this album in your collection, like the others as well, if you don't have them already. This band has been going since Halloween of 1990. They've been going for 33 years. And they formed in Los Angeles, California, been going strong ever since, become one of my favorite bands when I heard them back in 2008 and couldn't get enough. And then I found out about this album I'm going to be showing you shortly. And this has been going strong for 31 years now. And you can see why if you've heard it. If you haven't, pause this video, go listen to it, and come back, because it's just insane. This is Fear Factory and their 1992 debut, Soul of a New Machine. This is intense, it's hard hitting, and it's an absolute awesome mix of industrial death metal with that nice mix of grindcore in there, industrial death metal. That's the best way to describe this album. And this band was formed by Burton Seabell and Dino Cazares back in 1989, and they were actually under a name called Ulceration from that year of 1989 to 1990, and then changed it to Fear the Factory because there was a factory next door to the rehearsal space where they were at the time, but then just changed it to the band we know today on the 31st of October of 1990. Of course, they recorded what would be Concrete, and that would be released back in 2002. And I've heard that, and it's pretty much early recordings of what this album would become. And yeah, it's just showing you, and the demos are showing you what would become this album. And even songs from that would go on later releases. But let's talk about this one, and let's show the back as well. So we got Burton, Dino, and of course we have Andrew and Raymond, because I just put it straight to the camera. There we go. Let's get a close up of their faces again. Of course, released by Roadrunner Records. And I've said this before, and I'm going to keep saying it. If you don't have this album, then pick it up. If you do not have this one in your collection, be it just your metal collection or your Fear Factory collection, definitely one that you need. This came out pretty much at the height of death metal. And the only thing that's different from other death metal albums, because obviously when you hear Nocturnus, you got the keyboards in there, so they were one of the first bands to use that. Well, these guys were pretty much one of those bands not only doing growls, but cleans. And of course, that's coming from Burton over here. And of course, he hasn't been in the band since 2020 because he did one last album with them and then he was gone after that. But this is one of my favorite performances of his on this album, and also their 1995 release, The Manufacturer, another one of my favorites. So if I was going to pick two of my early favorite Fear Factory albums, it would be that one and this one. let's show the CD and a bit more in here, like who does what. And I think it also has who did the artwork as well. No, I do. All right, down here then, right over here, and of course, flips out like this. It's got all the lyrics. Of course, the double F there, and see artwork a bit better without the case glaring from the light glaring on the case. And yeah, this is pretty much sums up pretty much the title of the album. And it's like I said, and I didn't use this word earlier, but it's unique because of Burton not only doing your standard death metal growls and he does some screams on this, but he did cleans. And Dino said in an interview, which is when they played at Dynamo in 1993, said this to Vanessa Warwick, who interviewed so many bands around that time, saying that he heard Burton in the shower singing, and it was like, yeah, I want this guy in the band. And pretty much discovering that, oh, we can do cleans, but oh, you can do this as well. And of course they did, going up to the discography, they did a compilation, a split called Los Angeles Death Collation, I think that's how you say it, with 4 other bands, one being Demolition, and one's called FCD and Tormentor, and Resistance Culture, which are bands I'm not too familiar with. And then, of course, they did 2 demos in 1991, which had a different bass player on that album, which was by the name of Andy Ramon. And of course, he didn't do this album. He did, I think, did 2 of the demos. And I think all the stuff that ended up being on Concrete, which obviously a lot of songs from there ended up on this one, and then some of them ended up on Demanufacturer. Before I forget, cheers. And because I've heard the Concrete stuff and the different versions of certain songs, so like let's get that up a minute for me to look at so I can compare. And yeah, because like I said, some of the songs are like Suffrages on Concrete. That the version on there is a little different from the one on, of course, on the debut here. A Rise Above Oppression, which is, I think, one of the many death metal grindcore songs that they have on here. Of course, Escape Confusion, the different versions of that, and Crisis, Self-Immolation, another one that's also on Soul of a New Machine. And of course, the track number 15, if I remember correctly, ended up being on Demanufacturer. Let's have a double check of that. Yep, I was right. Demanufacturer, which was 1995, so that was 3 years after this. But yeah, this album here, and probably people were like, okay, this is weird. He's doing your growling like you would hear in so many different death metal bands around the late 80s, early 90s, when death metal started taking off, so to speak. But then you heard this and people were like, okay, some people were like, I'm not a fan of it because I'm not a fan of heavy music like that, like death metal with cleans on it. And now there's a ton of different death metal bands that do cleans nowadays. more in the melodic death metal genre, like subgenre, more melodic death metal, but still, this is quite melodic in some areas of the album, but like intense ones being like Martyr, Leechmaster, Scapegoat, Crisis. Yeah, I mean, every song on this album, start to finish, is just, it's just pure, intense heaviness. And I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that won't like this album, or may not even like Fear Factory, because of the reasons that I said. Like, it's death metal with clean vocals, so it's industrial death metal. So influences I get from this instantly, like I mentioned, the grindcore. Of course, I get Napalm Death. That's like one of the many bands, and I think maybe some Repulsions mixed in there as well. They would have been influenced by so many different bands. Maybe not all of them metal. It's like going back to grindcore, like Napalm Death being like the prime influence. And for the industrial side of this would be Godflesh, because Burton C. Bell even said in the same interview when they were at Dynamo Fest, whoever got to see him there, lucky you, said his collection ranges from Willie Nelson to Godflesh. And of course, there's a lot of Godflesh influence on this album, specifically this one, and maybe a bit on Demanufacture, but where I'm hearing it the most is on here. And of course, getting influence from various different death metal bands. I couldn't tell you which, I couldn't really pinpoint one, but definitely got that in there. So death metal wise, it would be various different death metal bands. The industrial bit would be Godflesh mainly. Grindcore would be mainly Napalm Death, but maybe a bit of Repulsion. I'm going to be listening to this again, obviously, and I'll, come up with, probably point something else out, like saying, oh yeah, there's I can definitely hear influence from this certain band in this music, in this album, in their music, especially from this album, which came out in the early 90s, so 1992. Absolutely just, I mean, like I said, if you haven't heard it yourself, you're brand new to it, listen to it and come up with your own conclusion. See what you think of it, what influences you got from it. But for those who have, feel free to comment down below and tell me what you thought of the album. Like, did you love the whole album? Did you like just certain songs? Were you not a fan of it to begin with, but over time you're like, well, maybe this had something back in the day? But obviously it was coming out at the time where bands like Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, and Morbid Angel, and Deicide, and Grave, and Dismember, and bands like that were releasing albums. And of course, when you hear death metal, you mainly just think like growls and gutturals, but all that. You never got anything with cleans, and that's what makes this unique. Basically, like with one of the albums that I mentioned on my very first favorite death metal albums, Nocturnus. What makes that unique is that it's a death metal band with keyboards. That's what makes them unique. What made Fear Factory unique was the cleans, because you never really heard that in death metal. And of course, they didn't stick with death metal for that long. They stuck with the industrial bit, but went more to the groove metal side of metal, pretty much. But if you just want something much earlier than what they've released years after this, then this is for you. If even if you're someone who's like, I only like this album, that's perfectly fine. I like this one. The Manufacturer, Obsolete's really cool as well. They're all great albums. But if I was going to pick one just to play over and over again, or two, obviously the Manufacturer and this one. And usually when you saw death metal bands, it always had like lyric logos where either it's dripping with blood or it's got like pointy areas, like, or that with blood dripping from it, or to the point where it was unrecognizable to read. These guys weren't like that, so you knew what they were. So again, when I look at that, I think like when you look at Godflesh, when you see it's like it says Godflesh. So here it says Fear Factory. And when this album came out in 1992, and you remember the specific date, the 25th of October, 1992, again on Roadrunner Records. Yeah, this album has 17 songs on it. So you got 17 songs of absolute intense brutality, basically. And the album itself is 55 minutes and 13 seconds long. It's just insane. Of course, Napalm, they're having the A side and B side is going to like that as well is insane. And then you get this one's like 17 songs, but obviously Scum had more songs than this. And of course, after that, they did another split called The Breed Beyond, which was with Cynic, Pestilence, and Believer. And another band called Tree Ponem Power. I think I just said that wrong completely. And obviously did the more industrial sounding album, Fear is the Mind Killer, which was mentioned in that interview. And of course, they were on tour. They were on tour with so many different bands. One of note was with Brutal Truth. And I found some footage of them when they were on tour with Brutal Truth, and found footage of Brutal Truth on that same tour. So I found the venue. And they've on tours with so many different bands, Obituary being one of them, because I found one footage of them playing Suffrage. And behind them was a banner of Obituary. So they went on tour with them, and they done a few shows, one or two shows. Not sure how many they did. I know they done shows with Cannibal Corpse and Deicide, or Deicide, which however you want to say it. I say either way. Done shows with so many of those bands back in the day. So many of those death metal grindcore bands back in the day, and even Sick of It All. If you're into your punk, like you're hardcore, Sick of It All. If you're into that band, then and I've heard a bit of Sick of It All, and that's really cool stuff. So these guys could play with any band. Like it could be death metal, it could be thrash metal, it can be hardcore punk. I think these guys might have played with Agnostic Front. If you're not familiar with them, there's a band definitely you guys need to check out if you love your hardcore punk, old school hardcore punk. And that stuff I'll be covering here as well. So, but if you love that mix of industrial metal with death metal and grindcore, there's a lot of samples on. There's a lot of things you will hear in industrial sounding music albums. Of course, with which one is it? Crisis. You got that bass part, because the note here, Andrew didn't do the bass on this album. They got him in afterwards. Dino did the bass on this entire album. And because Raymond's drumming on this is just completely balls to the wall mental, absolute just killer drummer. And there's so many that I can name. He was one of them. I'll be naming more in this, not this episode, but in this series. And yeah, just everything accompanies each other. The vocals, the guitars, the bass, the drums. And even when I seen like live footage of him live, just completely always on board. Of course, they had a keyboard player that did all the samples live, and he'd just be thrashing around, headbanging where he is. And cheers again, my Griffin Cup here. Don't know what else more I can say about this album in like specifically. That it's just, I might be going as far as saying a timeless classic. It's very underrated. I don't think it gets talked. I've said this a bunch of times about albums, and I've heard it on other channels as well. Doesn't get talked about very much. I think this album, again, I've said this before, probably got overlooked a lot. I know it would have got overlooked a lot because people would have been like, I don't like this band because it's a death metal band with cleans. And I've mentioned before, it's industrial death metal. So if you like industrial metal and death metal or industrial music, you may like this. You may enjoy certain aspects of it, or you might be more into Fear is the Mind Killer. But I'm only for absolute fans of intense metal. If you love your death metal and you love your industrial metal, you're into Godflesh, you're into Obituary, and I'm trying to think more bands that these guys would have taken influence from. And you like Napalm Death. So if you like Napalm Death and Godflesh, so you like your grindcore, you like your industrial metal, and you like death metal, and you like it, and it's really mixed well, and I mean mixed well, that you can't get enough of it. This is definitely the album for you. It's all the songs from start to finish are awesome. Of course, I got my favorites. Obviously, the first track, Martyr, Leechmaster, Scapegoat, Crisis, Crash Test, Fleshhold, Life Blind, Scum Grief, Suffrage. There's a ton more in here. Those are just some of my favorites. And even it's an album that I would just play in its entirety because it's an album that is worth that. So for anyone that might have heard this back in the day and didn't think too much of it, and going back to liking your grindcore, your death metal, your industrial metal, and going back to if you didn't enjoy it the first time around, you might enjoy it this time around. You might have grown to appreciate it a little bit more. Because if that was me back then, I'd be like, okay, this is a little bit weird. I'll put it to one side for now. And then I'll go back to him like, I actually like this, because then, I hear all that stuff, that I've already mentioned, the industrial side of it, the death metal side of it, mixing industrial metal with death metal. And it's just, what I'm saying is, it's an excellent album. It's one for those out there who love extreme music, be it fast, intense riffing, intense drumming, so many just punching you in the face growls, and those who love just heavy, atmospheric, slow, heavy music, and then going back to the really fast, intense stuff that makes you want to keep getting on stage and stage diving, like you when you go to those shows, like punk shows, grindcore shows, a lot of death metal shows back in the day. If you are into that stuff, then look no further than Fear Factory and Soul of a New Machine. Absolutely incredible album. I love it. And I know there's going to be some out there who are like, I love it too. Those are like, not sure, but I'll give it another go. Or those are like, didn't like it anyway. And people like, never heard of it. I may actually go check it out. Do it. It's just absolutely incredible. And that is it for another episode of my Metal Vault. I will be recording another episode of this because I'm going to be busy next week doing stuff. So I'm not going to have time to actually record the other videos. So my favorite death metal video in the next episode of that, and the 2 Metal Vault ones that I got coming up. So one next Saturday and Tuesday. And just have so many more to show you. And this is an album that I absolutely love. And the reason I showed it is because, of course, I was mentioned in my chat with Matt from Blaspheme. We mentioned metal, and Fear Factory was one of his all-time favorite bands. And of course, seeing him on my birthday back in November. Of course, I was there to celebrate my birthday, but I was also there to remember him for how he was. Awesome person who loved an awesome band like this. And of course, he had a long sleeve of this as well. This is for you, brother. This is for you. Fear Factory. Soul New Machine. I've been Jake of Jake's Metal Chat. Keep that banner of metal held high. Low more Metal Vault videos to come. More favorite death metal albums to come. Favorite underground metal releases will be coming back. More chats. More of all that stuff. So thank you all again for tuning in. Thank you for supporting the channel. And I'll see you all in the next one.